Ladies and gentlemen, when the empath steps into the orbit of the narcissist, what takes place is not a casual encounter, but the ancient drama of light and shadow. The empath, by their very nature, embodies openness, sincerity, and a willingness to connect at the deepest level of being. Their presence is transparent, their emotions flow freely, and their heart is tuned to the suffering and needs of others. The narcissist, by contrast, embodies the hollow shadow that thrives on consumption, on bending reality into a reflection of their hunger. When these two archetypal forces meet, it is as though the sun has cast its light into the darkest cave, illuminating not only what is hidden, but also provoking resistance from the darkness itself. The empath carries light not because it is easy, but because it is natural to them. Their light is not loud or demanding. It is subtle, patient, and nourishing, like a flame that warms and guides. Yet this same flame draws the shadow. The narcissist is magnetized by what the empath gives effortlessly, for the shadow yearns for light while simultaneously despising it. The narcissist seeks not to bask in that warmth, but to consume it, to turn it into fuel for their hollow core. And so, the encounter begins not as love, but as a subtle theft disguised as affection. The empath does not recognize at first the danger of this union. To them, connection is sacred, and trust is offered as a natural extension of the heart. They step toward the shadow, believing that understanding, care, and sacrifice will awaken the dormant soul within the narcissist. But here the paradox emerges. The shadow does not wish to be healed, it wishes to dominate. The light is mistaken as weakness, and compassion is exploited as a resource to be drained. This dynamic becomes a psychological theater where roles are enacted without words. The empath shines with vulnerability, honesty, and genuine love. The narcissist reflects these qualities back, but not as truth, only as a mask. They mirror the empath to lure them deeper, until the empath no longer sees the shadow for what it is, but instead sees only the illusion of shared depth. In this way, the light begins to bend, drawn into patterns it does not recognize, manipulated into doubting its own radiance. The encounter of light and shadow is not merely external. It awakens something within the empath as well. In facing the narcissist, the empath is forced to look into a mirror that does not reflect beauty but distortion. They see their own willingness to give endlessly, their fear of abandonment, their longing to heal, and the ways in which their openness can be turned into chains. The shadow exposes what lies in the hidden places of the empath's soul. Thus, the meeting is not only a battle with the other, but an initiation into the unexamined parts of the self. The shadow challenges the light, testing its endurance, its boundaries, its awareness. The empath feels drained, yet still they pour. They feel invisible, yet still they see. They feel unloved, yet still they love. Each moment deepens the tension between what they are and what the shadow demands. The more the empath shines, the more the narcissist seeks to eclipse it. And so the empath faces a crucial question: can light remain light when it is surrounded by darkness? What unfolds in this encounter is not simply personal struggle, but archetypal truth. Wherever light appears, shadow resists. Wherever shadow dominates, light seeks to illuminate. The empath and the narcissist are not merely individuals, they are embodiments of forces that have existed since the beginning of human consciousness. The empath is not just a person of sensitivity, but a bearer of clarity, carrying the essence of what is humanly tender and divine. The narcissist is not merely manipulative, but the very face of the void, the hunger that consumes without giving back. And yet, despite this resistance, the light never ceases to exist. Even when the empath is engulfed in confusion, even when their self is scattered by manipulation, the essence of who they are remains untouched. The shadow may try to bend it, silence it, or bury it, but it cannot destroy it. For the essence of light is eternal, it is the pulse of life, the energy that sustains creation itself. The narcissist may obscure it for a time, but in the deepest sense, the shadow only reveals how powerful the light truly is. Thus, The encounter between empath and narcissist is not simply the story of one being drained by another. It is the revelation of a deeper law, that light and shadow are bound to meet, that their meeting brings suffering, but also knowledge, and that in the very struggle between them lies the awakening of awareness. The empath, even in their pain, begins to see that their radiance is not fragile. It is the very reason the shadow seeks them. For light is always noticed by darkness, and it is always tested by it. When the empath enters the presence of the narcissist, they do not merely observe the darkness, they absorb it. Their heart, tuned to the unspoken currents of human pain, reaches out instinctively to hold what others recoil from. Where others see cruelty or manipulation, the empath feels the wound behind it. Where others hear only arrogance, the empath detects the buried shame. This gift, which is also their burden, makes them a vessel for emotions that are not their own. They drink in what is toxic, believing it can be transformed by the purity of their love. Yet in this process, the empath becomes a container of shadows, taking into themselves the very poison that corrodes their light. The narcissist offers little willingly, but what they exude is a steady stream of darkness. Their rage, their emptiness, their hunger for validation, all of it spills outward, seeking a host. The empath, sensitive and open, unconsciously becomes that host. They absorb the cutting words, the subtle manipulations, the unspoken contempt, and carry it within themselves as if it were their responsibility. What should pass through them becomes lodged, and the empath begins to feel emotions that are not their own. Anxiety, guilt, self-doubt, and even self-loathing then creep into their inner world, echoing the narcissist's unspoken torment. This absorption happens silently, almost invisibly. The empath does not announce it, nor do they always recognize it as it occurs. They mistake it for compassion, for patience, for love. To feel deeply what another feels is, after all, their nature. Yet with the narcissist, this gift becomes a slow erosion of the self. The empath carries burdens never meant for them, as though by shouldering the darkness, they can heal the one who cast it upon them. In truth, however, they are slowly being reshaped, their own inner landscape clouded by shadows that do not belong to them. To absorb darkness is not only to feel it, it is to internalize it. The empath begins to doubt their worth, echoing the narcissist's hidden disdain. They question their sanity, mirroring the narcissist's distorted projections. They begin to shrink their light, believing themselves unworthy of shining. This is the cruel irony. The narcissist plants their darkness in another, so they may appear untouched by it, while the empath silently carries what the narcissist refuses to acknowledge. And yet, in this very act, the empath undergoes a profound transformation. To absorb darkness is to encounter the shadow of humanity in its rawest form. It is to feel the wounds of the collective, the unresolved pain of generations, the hunger of a soul that has lost its connection to love. The empath, though harmed by it, becomes deeply intimate with the reality of suffering. They learn what manipulation feels like, how deception enters the bloodstream, how emptiness masquerades as power. This knowledge, though gained through suffering, becomes part of their inner vision. The experience is heavy and at times unbearable. The empath feels suffocated, as though drowning in emotions too dense to release. They may lose sight of who they are, mistaking the narcissist's darkness for their own reflection. In absorbing so much, they risk becoming shadows of themselves. Yet even in this, something essential remains untouched: the empath's ability to feel. The very sensitivity that made them vulnerable is also the thread that can lead them back to themselves. For while darkness can weigh upon them, it cannot erase the core of their being. The absorption of darkness, painful as it is, awakens in the empath a deeper awareness of the duality of human nature. They come to see that light is not merely brightness, and darkness is not merely evil. They are forces intertwined, teaching through their collision. By holding darkness within, even temporarily, the empath gains insight into its nature. They see how emptiness seeks fulfillment, how control masks fear, how cruelty hides despair. What was once only pain becomes a strange form of knowledge, a knowledge that no book or teaching could offer. And so, though the empath is wounded by this absorption, they are also changed by it. They carry scars, but within those scars lies a wisdom forged in struggle. To absorb the narcissist's darkness is to walk through an inner night, but in surviving, the empath learns to recognize both the fragility and the resilience of the human spirit. When the empath endures the labyrinth of the narcissist, survival becomes more than a simple act of endurance, it becomes an alchemy. What was once innocence, what was once blind compassion, is thrown into a crucible of betrayal, manipulation, and exhaustion. Inside this crucible, the empath's essence is tested by fire. The pain they endure does not merely scar, it transforms. For survival in such a relationship is not passive. It requires an inner reconfiguration, a reshaping of the self, where weakness is burned away and deeper strength is forged. The empath who survives discovers that they can no longer live by the same rules that once defined them. They once believed that love without limits could heal all things, that patience without boundaries could bridge every distance, that forgiveness without discernment could soften every heart. These ideals, beautiful though they are, collapse under the weight of the narcissist's darkness. The empath learns through suffering that limitless love without wisdom becomes fuel for exploitation, and that forgiveness without awareness becomes complicity. The fire of survival burns away illusions, leaving behind a purer, stronger substance. This process resembles the ancient art of alchemy, where base metals are subjected to intense heat until they are transmuted into something more valuable. The empath's naivety, their lack of boundaries, their endless giving, all become the raw material placed into the furnace of experience. Through struggle, disappointment, and heartbreak, these raw elements are melted down. What remains, after enduring such flames, is not the same being that entered the crucible, but something rarer, a soul tempered by knowledge and resilience. Survival itself requires choices the empath never imagined making. They must confront their own patterns, asking why they stayed, why they tolerated, why they carried burdens that were never theirs to hold. Each question peels away layers of unconscious behavior, forcing them into self-awareness. The pain acts as a teacher, showing them the places where their compassion turned into self-neglect, where their openness left them defenseless, where their silence became permission for abuse. This awareness is painful, but it is also the very material from which transformation is born. In the midst of this alchemy, the empath encounters a paradox. The very qualities that once placed them in danger are also the ones that can lead them to freedom. Their sensitivity, once a vulnerability, becomes the tool for recognizing manipulation early. Their compassion, once endless and blind, evolves into a love that includes themselves as worthy of care. Their openness, once exploited, sharpens into discernment. The fire does not destroy these qualities. It refines them into a form that can no longer be so easily broken. To survive is also to reclaim. The narcissist's darkness often leaves the empath fragmented, doubting their worth, questioning their identity. The process of survival demands that they gather these broken pieces and bring them back together. In doing so, they discover aspects of themselves they had never known, a voice that can say no, a strength that can walk away, a dignity that will not be bargained. This reclamation is perhaps the most powerful stage of the alchemy, the realization that what was once given away freely must now be guarded with intention. The empath emerges from this alchemical process carrying scars, but these scars are not signs of defeat. They are the inscriptions of transformation, proof that they endured fire and were not consumed. Every scar carries a story, and every story carries wisdom. They are no longer the untouched empath they once were, but neither are they consumed by bitterness. Instead, they embody a balance, a compassion informed by boundaries, a strength tempered by vulnerability, a love that has walked through the shadow and survived. This survival is not merely personal. It is symbolic, an enactment of the timeless pattern where descent into darkness leads to transformation. Just as myths speak of heroes who journey into the underworld and return with treasure, so too does the empath, by surviving, return with something rare, a wisdom that cannot be taught, only earned. The treasure they carry is not gold but the knowledge of themselves, and the understanding of human nature in its most raw and hidden forms. Survival, then, is not just escape. It is alchemy. It is the reshaping of pain into wisdom, naivety into clarity, and suffering into strength. The empath who has survived the narcissist is no longer merely a bearer of light, but a bearer of truth, one who has discovered, through fire, the unbreakable essence of their soul. There comes a moment, after the long descent through manipulation, confusion, and pain, when the empath who has survived stands before a threshold. They are no longer who they once were, no longer the unguarded giver, no longer the dreamer who believed that love alone could heal the abyss of another's emptiness. They have walked through darkness, carried burdens that were never theirs, and endured the weight of betrayal. Yet survival has brought them to something greater, an initiation into sovereignty. Sovereignty is not mere independence. It is not a simple declaration of freedom. It is a reclamation of the self in its fullest form, mind, body, heart, and spirit, reunited under the authority of the soul. The empath, once fractured by the narcissist's shadow, learns that to be sovereign is to no longer place one's light in the hands of another, to no longer seek validation in the eyes of those who would distort it. Sovereignty is a return not to innocence, but to wholeness. The journey toward sovereignty begins quietly. The empath, in their survival, recognizes the subtle but profound truth that they belong first to themselves. Their emotions, once entangled in the web of another's manipulation, are reclaimed as their own. Their voice, once silenced or dismissed, grows stronger, firmer, no longer trembling with fear of rejection. Their boundaries, once porous, now rise like sacred walls, not to imprison, but to protect the sanctity of their being. What was once a heart endlessly poured outward now beats with balance, giving, but also receiving, loving, but also discerning. This initiation demands a breaking of old patterns. The empath must release the belief that their worth is proven by sacrifice, that their identity is defined by what they can heal in others. Such beliefs were the chains that bound them to the narcissist, chains forged not only by manipulation, but by their own unconscious need to serve, to save, to mend. In sovereignty, those chains dissolve. The empath no longer feels compelled to rescue the void. They can look upon the shadow with clarity, seeing its hunger, its emptiness, its manipulations, and choose not to enter. This choice, once impossible, becomes the very mark of sovereignty, the ability to say no without guilt, to protect one's essence without apology. The empath, now sovereign, discovers a new kind of power. It is not the loud power of domination, nor the shallow power of appearances. It is the quiet, steady power of self-possession. They walk into rooms no longer seeking approval, but radiating a presence that speaks of trials endured and wisdom earned. They no longer bend to fit the expectations of others, for they have learned the cost of denying themselves. Sovereignty gives them a new posture, upright, grounded, unshakable. Their compassion remains, but it is no longer exploited. It is directed with intention, offered where it can nourish, withheld where it would be consumed. This transformation is not only psychological but spiritual. To stand in sovereignty is to recognize the sacredness of one's own soul. The empath comes to see that their sensitivity, once seen as weakness, is a divine gift, a channel for deeper connection with life itself. But now it is no longer a gift left unguarded. It is a flame kept within a vessel, burning brightly but shielded from the winds of exploitation. They become the guardian of their own inner temple, refusing entry to those who come with deceit, welcoming only those who come with reverence. And with sovereignty comes peace. No longer do they battle endlessly to prove their worth. No longer do they crumble under the weight of manipulation. They exist in a state of quiet dignity, knowing that their strength is not in control of others, but in mastery of themselves. This peace is not fragile but resilient, for it was born in struggle and refined in survival. The empath's initiation into sovereignty is not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a new one. They carry forward not just the scars of what they endured, but the wisdom that those scars signify. They are no longer defined by the narcissist's darkness, nor by the suffering it caused. Instead, they are defined by the truth they have uncovered, that the greatest power one can hold is the authority over one's own soul. Thank you.